before turning over to our students. And I think the order of the PowerPoint is going to be, just so you're prepared, Reese, you'll be coming up first after I've spoken, and then we'll move through the PowerPoint to the other speakers as we go. So this is kind of one of my favorite slides to kind of start off thinking about why classics now, because I'm sure if you've studied any kind of classics in the past, any ancient history, and you've told that to somebody else, inevitably they've said, oh, haha, it's all Greek to me, it's all ancient history, it doesn't matter anymore. And yet here we have a slide where I'm sure you've seen this film, The 300 Spartans, kind of a great film of its day. But this is about a moment of ancient history. Surely it makes a great film, but it's something that happened 2,500 years ago. Why do the Spartans matter? And yet here, published just a few years ago, on the right-hand side is the front cover of a very recent history of the US Marine Corps, which calls itself American Spartans. The language and value and meaning of the term Spartan is still very much alive, and still very much that's something that people around the world in different parts of the world want to link themselves to. And as a result, we have to think about the extent to which those links are valid and what they're trying to project in the modern world by linking back to Gerard Butler in his tight little leather nappy underpants from 2,500 years ago. But it's not just the US Marines trying to do this. Actually, the more you look around you, I always think, the more you see occasions in which people are trying to take up the language of the ancient world in order to make a particular point and position themselves in a particular way in the modern world. On the left-hand side there, you see the French magazine Libération that kind of is taking the mick a little bit out of the French president because he really likes to sort of see himself and project himself as a new Jupiter, a new king of the gods, a new Zeus figure coming in to rule over the French state. And he's not the only one who's got big impressions about their own role in society. Mark Zuckerberg, kind of who runs Facebook, of course, is often comparing himself and talking about the dear old emperor, Roman Emperor Augustus, and he even mimics the pose half the time, as you can see in this photo, and him seeing himself, Mark Zuckerberg seeing himself as doing the same as Augustus did in ancient Rome, bringing peace, unity, and goodwill to an entire Roman world in Augustus's case, or indeed to the entire global world in Mark Zuckerberg's case. In both cases, we might want to ask whether or not this is a healthy idea that they both have, but also kind of what they mean by it and what they want to achieve through this ancient connection. And it's not just people in terms of their own personal desires, it's actually material goods and businesses. I was amazed to find out myself that Amazon Alexa, the Alexa is called Alexa because Amazon wanted to echo the Library of Alexandria, the great font of all knowledge in the ancient world. So wherever we look, I think, in the modern world, whether it's at people, their actions, their desires, or indeed at the goods, materials, and physical world around us, we see the ancient world being used and abused. And this is even true in places where you think the ancient world might never have reached, including, oh dear, this keeps moving around, including China. I was amazed when I went to China in 2018 to do a research fellowship position there. This was the picture that greeted me when I arrived at Beijing Airport. It's of the Beijing Fine Art Academy that is, as they are there, these Chinese artists scrupulously copying works of ancient Greek art. And you might recognize a few of them in the background there, caryatid from the Erechtheion on the Acropolis, or a Nike of Samothrace standing there proudly in the background. Even China in this 21st century wants to think itself able to incorporate, understand, play with the cultures of the ancient world. And I said use and abuse very carefully because actually in America at the moment, back in the Western Hemisphere, what we see is quite an active campaign to try and catalogue and thus understand and refute the misunderstandings and misrepresentations and misuse of ancient material to justify modern, often right-wing, homophobic and xenophobic views, particularly among American politicians. I would advise that you all go and have a look at the Pharos project, Doing Justice to the Classics. The website is there because they're responding to and refuting every appropriation of Greco-Roman antiquity by many of these groups. So we have an important job to do with Why Classics Now, in my view, not only in understanding the value of the ancient world in the modern world, not only understanding the ways in which people want to align themselves with the ancient world in the modern world, but also to stand there and push back when the modern world is most deliberately misusing the ancient. Reese, going to hand over to you now. So take it away.
Hello. My response to the question why classics now is one of my passions I found at university is language and the adaptation of language. So we're talking about a little bit about idioms and etymology, and then some themes that we see like socially throughout the modern times and the old times. So my first one is a little bit of an interactive. I could drop in the chat what human phrases are. So we've got 4 phrases here. I'll give you like a few seconds to drop stuff in the chat if you could, and then we're going to go through what these phrases are and what their ancient connotations are. A few seconds. I don't know how long it's good for this. Cool. Thank you, Samuel. That's what we got in. Right, I'm going to continue, and as they come in, I'll talk about which phrases. So the first one we're going to do is a very obvious one, between a rock and a hard place. Although I'm going to have to jump around on the slides now. Ooh. Oh, I didn't form. Hopefully this is the first one. It is not. We're starting with spill the beans. So spill the beans is a phrase that we still hear. Achilles heel, thank you very much. So spill the beans means to reveal secret information accidentally or maliciously, often ruining surprise or other plan. So it's believed this phrase originated in Greece from the actual voting system. So we all know Greece is very well known for their democracy and their ability to vote and cast votes. So spill the beans kind of connotes putting white or black beans in a jar, where a white bean indicated a positive vote and a black bean indicated a negative. I don't know about you guys, but I never knew this phrase had any connotations to anything. I just thought it was kind of a silly off-the-cuff phrase. What other ones we've got? Wrong end of the stick and Achilles heel, and that's all 4 of them, so that's brilliant. We can just move on. Thank you, guys. So the second one we're going to go over is very obviously, probably the most obvious one on the screen, apart from the literal rock and hard place, is Achilles heel. So I feel like everyone's heard of this one, and everyone kind of knows the myth of Achilles. But it's very interesting how this phrase has become so well known, because it's from a piece of ancient literature, yet we speak about it and we know about it, and it obviously has its medical connotations as well. So Achilles was said to have been dipped in the river Styx by his mother Thetis in order to make him invulnerable. His heel wasn't covered by the water, and he was later killed by an arrow wound to his heel. So we often use this phrase as a kind of speaking about someone's one weakness, like the one thing that they can't deal with, the one thing that will be their downfall. And I find it really interesting that this theme of epic, and also the theme that so everyone has this fatal flaw, is used quite commonly in just our everyday today language, when it has such ancient and like we think of as highbrow connotations, has kind of invaded itself into our everyday speech. So the third one is Run End of the Stick. Probably the funniest, but this is actually a good theme in classics as well, is this is disputed. Some people believe wrong end of the stick comes from a walking stick kind of thing. So one side of the walking stick will be dirty and muddy from touching the ground, and the other half is the whole side you hold. And then the other kind of linguistic theory is that the wrong end of the stick comes from a poop stick the Romans would use at their public laboratories. So often a porter or a slave, or maybe someone else, not a colleague, but an acquaintance in the bathrooms would pass you the stick. And you obviously wouldn't want to grab the sponge end because that's been on someone's bottom. But I thought this one was pretty cool because wrong end of the stick does not sound like it's anything potty related. but also because it also shows a big theme in classics, which is up for debate because we have so many gaps, there's so much missing, but also despite how fragmentary some of the information is about it today, and it still crops up from now and then, depending on where you are in the world. So in the last phrase, when it comes up, loading dots, is as Samuel put first down in the chat, so thanks for the eagerness there, caught between a rock and a hard place. This is another disputed one, but some people believe that caught between a rock and a hard place imitates / reflects one of the episodes of the Odyssey. So in the mythology of the Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus must sail in between two very big, scary obstacles. One of them is Charybdis, the treacherous waterfall, and Scylla, a horrid man-eating, picky-up monster. So both of these are difficult obstacles, and one of them quite literally, or two of them quite literally, could kill them. So basically, sailing in between them is caught between a rock and a hard place is a very hard decision you have to make, and it's a phrase we still use today. So basically describe the drama that happened, but when hearing caught between a rock and a hard place, it's kind of one of those things that you think, where did that come from? Because it's not really reflective of anything, and then when you actually look into the history of it, it's a very well-known story that we might not have actually connected back to. I'll move on from Gail to talk a little bit about when studying. So I'm sure we have all seen a beware of the dog sign, but when I was in Pompeii, I saw this little guy, Cave Canem, which basically means be cautious of or be advised of, in accusative, the dog. So in century BC, people were sticking things outside their front door that said beware of the dog, much like the way people kind of stick these signs on their back gates. And that is a social practice that we've somehow continued for hundreds of years. And I find that very interesting on a social level, that we're still kind of portraying like the same kind of imagery, and we've all had the same kind of problems. And like why classics now is important to me is because although these humans lived a very long time ago, we are still humans and we have the same human condition, and to some extent some of the same problems as well. So vicious dogs or protecting ourselves and our property is something that humans have held close to each other ourselves for a long time. And I find that pretty cool that there was ancient beware of the dog signs. I found it really interesting in my first year. It's kind of stuck with me since then. Oh, and my last point is of classical reception, which is a big thing in classics at the minute. A lot of foundations, and I know Michael's very involved with classical reception outreach as well. So this is from when I was in Rome. I actually went past the Rome Lego store, and I found it very interesting the way that they used Lego pieces to recreate this right bottom picture here of the Trevi Fountain, because in my mind an actual mosaic is tiny little squares put together to make an image, and thinking big brainly between the lines, I kind of thought Lego is the modern version of mosaics, like creating ideas that although old mosaics were more stuck around for longer, we still have some of them today. We kind of do the same things. We like putting things together. We like portraying images. So I found that kind of like an interesting kind of classical reception thing, where we kind of adopted a traditional practice but made it more accessible and more widespread. I think that's the last thing I have to say.
Brilliant, Reese. Thank you so much indeed. That's fab. Now, whose is this one up next? Why classics now?
That's me.
Okay, take it away.
So when I was thinking about the whole discussion, I came to the conclusion that the underlying question to this whole thing is, we're really asking, what is the value and relevance of studying classics? Why study classics and not politics or philosophy, or why not liberal arts? And is just studying the work of old dead men or some pots with some snazzy paintings, or is it something more? And personally, I think that classics, it's not just a study of a distant past that has no relevance to the present. It's quite the opposite. Almost everything in the modern Western world has its classical roots. And this is my foundational point, that studying classics helps understand our world, the way that it works, and how we got here. And I don't think there's anything more valuable than that. Much of what we experience in our own lives has its origins in the ancient Greek and Roman worlds, from architecture to big ideas in philosophy, medicine, law, democracy. And they can even offer an insight into debates on issues like institutional racism. So this year, one of the modules that I'm taking, which is actually led by Michael, is Democracy and Imperialism, which looks at Athens, the proclaimed torchbearer of ancient democracy, how it rose to power, how democracy is established in Athens, and it's the study of the very roots of our political thought. By studying it, we begin to answer questions like, why do we have democracy? Why, or if democracy is good, is modern democracy anything like its original? And is it a system which needs reform? So classics is at the root of asking questions, and it also sets us in good stead to answer them. Another module that I'm taking is Africa and the Making of Classical Literature. And that looks at significant contributions made by Africa in creating the classical canon and their simultaneous erasure from history. And it's a module which is incredibly relevant in light of the recent BLM movement and more broadly, the efforts over the years to decolonize the curriculum. And it helps paint a picture as to how ideas underlining institutional racism were formed and how they were sustained, and how the classical world was used to justify ideas like the superiority of one race over another. I think classics helps us understand who we are, our identity. So over the summer, I completed a project which was looking at identity, how we create it, and the ancient Greek parallels between forming a collective Greek identity and the perceptions of us versus them, of the other, in political discourse, and the parallels around that to the Iraq War and the political discussions around it, and the use of the values like freedom, like democracy, to justify violence on behalf of the US and the UK. So classics directly feeds into our political institutions, our art, our architecture, our Lego, our perceptions of ourselves and others, our identity. So we know who we are and how we arrived here through looking to our past. And classics is the very cornerstone on which the Western world stands. And as such, it never expires in its relevance. So really, the answer to why classics now is that classics is always relevant. It always has been and always will be. Yeah, that's all.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you very much indeed. Who is coming up? Whose is this one? Who is this, Annie or Josh?
Sorry, that's me. Hi, everyone. I must apologize for the font. I promise you it was really pretty, and I spent ages on making it look really pretty. But I think the software from the transfer just couldn't take it, so it's all very much Calibri for everybody right now, and I'm quite sorry. I'm not sure how to follow Busman. That was absolutely amazing. For me, when I was approaching this question, because I'm an incredibly cheesy person, I was kind of I wanted to turn away from the question of what's the relevance of classics in the wider world, because I mean, as my colleagues have perfectly demonstrated, it is still brilliantly relevant today in like the wider context of the world. But it's also, for me, I feel like the more important question, especially because you guys are prospective students, is, I mean, surely it should be more relevant to you. So I'm just going to talk to you about how I perceive what classics has given me and how it's become relevant to my life and my experience. So for me, the study of the ancient world is the study of civilization itself. Like we said before, it's looking at everything from art, architecture, literature, history, food, economy, all of it. You have to look at the very founding principles of what we call a civilization or a society. And from the macro to the micro, we are taught to actually investigate that, not just to acknowledge it, but we also have to question it. We can't just take it as a given truth. So this is the idea. What is a society and how did it come to be? Exactly as my colleagues have put it forward so far. I would say that classics gives you this sense of perspective that helps you develop that more instinctual critical eye. The idea that no matter the context, you're still going to trust yourself in doubting something or trust yourself in questioning something. You're going to go above and beyond the context that you've been given to find the truth behind it. And I think that's an invaluable tool for life itself, to be honest, because it's what teaches you to think for yourself. And if that's not what university is about, I don't know what is. So that's probably one of the main parts of that relevance of classics for me. But in the really, really cheesy way, this is the kind of the thought that I've developed now over the past couple of years, is that we have become, as classicists or students of ancient history or students of classical civilization, all of it, just the students of that ancient world, we are kind of guardians of memory. And we're here to also guard culture and heritage. We need to be here to make sure that there are people who remember that these things once were, that these buildings belong to civilizations. There are entire cultures that, yes, have roots in the world of today, obviously. As Basma said, the ancient world is the cornerstone of the Western world today, obviously. But we need to remember that, because we need to remember where we're from. I mean, you can't know where to go, how to go forward, if you don't know where you've actually come from. And it's the idea of who we were before, how we truly changed, and the mistakes that we've made in the past, so that we're aware of what's happened and we can learn from that experience. Because, I mean, as Reece said, we haven't actually changed. In a lot of ways, we haven't actually changed that much. So it's a brilliant way to be able to look all the way back and to gain that perspective, and therefore become that guardians of memory and culture and stuff like that. I mean, that's the fantastic thing about studying classics, is that it's so interdisciplinary that you can kind of make it what you want it to be, because there's an entire civilization, multiple civilizations that you can study. So why not just do it? And I would say that is probably my answer to the question, is answering with another question. I mean, why now? Why not? It's incredibly vast. You can make it your own degree. I mean, obviously it requires passion, because, I mean, we are the ones who choose to remember. We are the ones who choose to investigate, and it's difficult. So, you know, obviously it requires passion, but any degree requires passion. So yeah, that's my answer to it. Instead of it being why now in the wider context of the world, it's for you, why not do it? Because you're already here, so you're already asking yourself about it. That means that you've already got that investigative spirit. And that means that you can then learn to develop that, learn to think for yourself, and have a lot of fun whilst you're doing it. Because let's be honest, we probably all read Percy Jackson at one point or another, and the mythology behind it got us all hooked. So yeah, I'd say do it because you love it and because it's incredibly interesting, but also because it will actually teach you invaluable life skills. So yes, it's relevant today, but most importantly, it should be relevant to you. That's the idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Indeed. Okay, and we are back to, yes, to Annie. There we are. Annie, take it away as the final speaker.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to lower the tone ever so slightly with these lovely pics of us all in the Classic Society. I'm quite pleased that George Fletcher isn't here, because he's the one dressed as a gladiator on the side. Yeah, so I'm basically going to be discussing sort of one random thing that I found that sort of explains why classics now, I guess. And for me, it's this sign here. And, you know, I came across this sign, and the first thing that comes to mind when you look at something like this is, of course, Ireland. You know, there's all the green, and the script, this writing is just so Irish. You see it on every single sign around St. Patrick's Day. The identity is extremely Irish, and that's exactly what this sign is. It's actually sort of a welcoming sign. If anyone forgives my dodgy Irish pronunciation, I believe it's pronounced Cad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes, and it's the sort of thing you'd find above, you know, pretty much any Irish pub. You know, what about this links into the classics? Well, if you look a bit closer, you can actually find some things that I think are really interesting. So this sort of kind of almost squidgy looking script that now we associate so much with Ireland is actually called uncial script. And it was used and developed by Latin scribes from about the 4th to the 8th centuries AD. So how does, a pub in Ireland have a sign over its door that was written in the script of a civilization that died out over 1,000 years before? How does a script such as this become so associated with one culture that its origin in another is completely overlooked? And how does this sign come to have its roots in Latin? Or perhaps how did Latin come to be the common ancestor of so many things in our everyday life that we just don't even think about? I think this is just one example of how ingrained classics is in our modern day life. And really, if we're wanting to ask the question of why classics now, and even if looking in the wider world, if we want to learn about the world around us, I think looking back a couple thousand years actually doesn't seem that bad of a place to start. So, yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Annie. That's absolutely fab. So we've got a couple of minutes left where we really want to hear some of your thoughts as well as to why you think classics now, and to kind of how you might have agreed with some of the things that have been said by myself and our students, or disagreed with us as well. We do love a good disagreement, so do tell us if you think we're talking rubbish, and kind of let us know your thoughts either through the Q&A chat function, or indeed, obviously, you can always get in touch with us as well. So the easiest way to get in touch is via email with classics@warwick.ac.uk after these sessions, and then your email can be forwarded to the particular person you want to carry on chatting with. So do take a chance now to put forward your questions and thoughts. What's got you interested in classics? Is it Percy Jackson, as Josh has put it forward? Is it that sign that you saw above the door of the pub that obviously you haven't been spending too much time in because you've been very, very, very studious? Is it kind of a sign you have seen, an object you've held in your hands? What is it that's got you guys interested in classics and wanting to study it now? Do let us know your thoughts while we've got a moment or two left of this session, and before we sort of bid you goodbye for this session. But there are also, obviously, don't forget, some meet and greet possibilities for one-to-one conversations with staff members happening between 3 and 4 o'clock. Meet and engage, I should say, rather than meet and greet. Sounds like I'm an airport, doesn't it? Meet and engage between 3 and 4 o'clock. So do come and join us for those if you would like to have some one-on-one chats. So we've got a sort of teensy amount of time, but no questions are coming forward just yet from you all. In that case, I'm going to be very cruel, and I'm going to pick on one of our students to say, to kind of respond to this question, which is something that I always get kind of asked. I'm going to say, has someone saved you? Oh, no, it's Elena with the Meet and Engage link. No one saved you. The question is kind of, people say to me, this kind of classic stuff. It's all very interesting. Yep, it's all fab. It's all fascinating. Everyone kind of, loves all the stories. But and this is what my parents said to me, frankly, what are you going to do with it, right? What are you going to do with it kind of afterwards? What are you going to do in terms of getting a job? So I know this will have come up in a number of different sessions and thinking about, and I'm sure it's on kind of your thoughts as well at some stage. So we hit with Reese first. You get to go first. What are you hoping that classics will do for you in the future in terms of where you want to go next after your degree?
Thank you for passing that on to me so very graciously and kindly. I want to go into what we call outreach, which is offering a curriculum or a specific things to people who may not have access to it. So classics very traditionally has been taught in the upper echelons of society. For the past few years, we've been trying to bring it more down to a more accessible and engaging level. And that's one of the things I personally, because coming from background, but a background where I didn't have access to classics and I had access to it earlier. So I went to a lot of summer schools, and those summer schools what led me to going to uni. And I went to a lot of like kind of workshops, and I went to libraries doing random events, and I went to museums, and that was kind of how I consumed classics because it wasn't offered on my curriculum. I now want to, with my new knowledge of classics, go to be that person for other young people who may not have it taught in their schools. So I want to be kind of going into workshops on engaging topics, or I want to be going to a museum and explaining some objects, doing things like that that aren't necessarily being a traditional teacher, but that may not be accessible to people. And the department have been very supportive of that through their classics network. I've been able to get work experience, made some teaching resources. So if you're interested in that kind of like, if you ever did a summer school or if you ever did anything in that, Warwick's a very good place to be because they do have their own, as Michael is part of it as well, like you can get like kind of experience there, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, essentially I want to be a teacher, but I want to be a teacher in a non-traditional sense. To someone else, because otherwise I'll ramble for ages.
Thanks, Reese. We've got time. We're running out of time. We're over time, in fact. But one more of you, from Josh, Annie, or Basma, who wants to come forward with some thoughts in response to the question as well before we finish up for the session? Is anyone burning to come back?
I don't mind, Annie or Basma. I can if you want to. It's up to you.
Are we going to allow? Yeah. All
okay.
right. Go, Josh.
Okay, so I mean, my professional plan is a couple of years away now, but since second year now, I've been strongly considering heritage protection, just because it kind of pains me to see some of the most beautiful, I don't know, papyri, buildings, anything, just the material evidence of the world that was before us has been destroyed or abandoned or manipulated for political good. I mean, yeah, let's just say that I want to start protecting it more and seeing the realities of that. So my end game with classics is now to work for UNESCO, just for heritage protection at UNESCO. I'm not going to go too much into detail into it because it's very long and it sounds much less interesting when I go into detail about it. So I'll keep it to the cool. I'm going to work at UNESCO. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Josh. Indeed, that's great. Guys, thank you ever so much to you all for your time, particularly giving up your time on a precious Saturday afternoon. And thank you to you all coming for the open day, for joining us for this session as well. I know it's been a long day and there's lots of sessions going on. There's lots to take in. Most importantly, and hopefully you'll have got this message in several different sessions, is don't be a stranger. We are a very open and friendly department. We'd like to hear from you, like to know kind of what our students are thinking and talking about, and that includes people who are thinking about applying to join us and study with us. So please do get in touch with any questions you might have. Don't forget the Meet and Engage sessions between 3 and 4 this afternoon. Do come when you apply and get an offer from us. Don't forget also there will be offer holder open days, so chances to come back as an offer holder and get to know us a bit better. Hopefully, fingers crossed, COVID not getting in the way in person, and we very much look forward to seeing you all then. So can I say thank you? You've seen lots of thanks coming in to you all, to Josh, to Reese, to Basma and to Annie. Thank you for your time. Brilliant presentations all, and take care and have a lovely rest of your weekend. I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you all. Take care.